Hey, this is Rick Caselge from exercisesforinjuries.com. Today I have another interview for you, and it's coming to you from my hotel room in Orange County. So today I'm interviewing Beth, and Beth and I are going to chat about back pain and a new cause that she's seeing when it relates to back pain. So Beth, I'll get you to introduce yourself to the listeners and readers and viewers.
How you doing? I'm Beth Drayer. I'm a certified athletic trainer and certified strength and conditioning coach. Right now, I work in a Division I collegiate setting, working with their athletes there, and have been dealing with a lot of back pain lately. So it's been a very educational time for me as well, because no one person is the same as the other person, and everybody's been treated differently. So it's been pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you. I had a guest blog post from you a couple weeks ago. I got really good response from it, so I decided to get on Skype and do this video interview, kind of talking about back pain and what you're seeing in back pain with the athletes that you end up working with. So maybe you can kind of talk about what you're seeing when it relates to back pain in the athletes, 20-year-olds that you're working with.
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things that we see is tight hip flexors, and it's been almost across the board of the athletes that I've seen, from soccer to track to basketball. Like every person that's been through the training room basically has been tight hip flexors. So they're sitting in class, and then they get out of class and they go straight to practice, and from sitting to standing, and they're not really loosening up real well, and causing some pain, which is going to translate to the everyday population. People driving to work, sitting in their car, sitting all day at their desk, and then want to go out on the weekend and go be the weekend warrior. They're going to end up with pain because they don't stretch, they don't do what they need to do to take care of it, and they're sitting in a shortened position the whole time. Yeah. So it ends up really causing problems for them.
Definitely. So we would see, you would think someone in their 20s, they would end up having perfect posture and not end up having these, these issues or these, muscle imbalances that end up leading to, pain and injury. So,
Yeah.
Why does, this 20-year-old, which we'd assume would be completely fine, would end up having, back pain or this issue of anterior tilt and tight hip flexors?
Great question. Mostly because they spend 2 hours of the day practicing in an upright position, and then the rest of their day is spent sitting. Like, I'll ask my my athletes what they did over the weekend, and they say they spent the day on the couch. So their activity level is strictly their 2 hours of practice, and that's it. So they end up sitting so much more than they end up in active position. So every time they sit in that shortened position, it builds up over time, and they just end up in that rotated state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is the sitting thing is.
They keep saying
evil.
It's smoking.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. It really is. It really is the chronic sitting. And then what do you end up advising people when it comes to the sitting? So they're active and healthy and working on all those other components of their health and fitness when they're training. And then what do you recommend for them when it comes to preventing or overcoming this anterior tilt and this tight hip flexors?
A lot of actual tissue work. I have them stretch first thing in the morning when they get out of bed, do some foam roll, do some trigger point with a lacrosse ball, kind of, focus tissue work with a lacrosse ball, and then some general stretching as well. Do that when they get up in the morning before they go to bed at night. They're supposed to come in the training room before they go out to practice and do it. A lot of them are going straight from class straight out to practice, so some of them miss it. After practice, just try to get the mobility work in, as, 3-4 times a day, and it really does make a difference. But it's a commitment, and it's, but it takes 10 minutes. So, 30-40 minutes out of your day total of, your 16-18 hour day really isn't that much to ask to keep your back from hurting.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And, all those things are not difficult to do and they apply to anyone. So we kind of,
Exactly.
most people think that, back pain ends up happening to our parents or older people, but, it ends up happening with everyone. And the stats when it comes to even kids or children is astonishing. I think it's well over 50%
Yeah, it's
in
ridiculous.
like children. So then looking at young adults in their 20s, like your athletes, um, it sounds like it's a lot of that, body maintenance
Yeah,
that is so important for, anyone at any age to do. And all the things that you're talking about, end up applying when it comes to that. And maybe you can kind of expand on why, if people hear the word, I've got tight hip flexors, they might just think, well, I just got to stretch a little bit more. Maybe you
right.
can kind of explain why it ends up being a multi-modality, perspective that you end up doing. So it ends up being multiple things that you do as opposed to just stretch.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the other things that people tend to say, or I hear a lot of, is that they keep stretching their hamstrings. Their hamstrings are really tight, but the problem with that is that their hamstrings are already on a stretch because they're in this forward tilt. So they want to keep stretching their hamstrings, and I want them to stretch their hip flexors, because if you bring your if when their hip flexors are tight and you're put in that forward rotation, it puts the hamstrings on stretch. So if you can loosen the hip flexors up, put the hamstrings back in the neutral position, then they don't feel tight anymore, and they start feeling better. And it's the same thing with their back; takes the pressure off the back as well. So yeah, if it drives my mom crazy, but like I'll stretch while we're standing in line. Just standing there doing a easy hip flexor stretch is not that hard. You can do it anytime, wherever you are. So my dad and I will be standing in line and stretching, and she thinks we're crazy. So doing things like that, just any time during the day is going to help. In addition to, like I said, like the stretching in the morning, or like, if just getting up and going for a walk, a couple times a day, just to loosen things up and stretch things out. It's so important.
Oh, I mean, definitely, it ends up being, and just kind of explaining things a little bit more. So if you look, everyone knows where the pelvis is, so where kind of your hip bones are. I
Right.
mean, you end up having muscles that are attached to the front of the pelvis, and you have muscles attached into the back of the pelvis. And ideally, that pelvis is kind of
Uh,
level. If
yeah.
looking at if we
It's
look
like a
at the
bowl.
bowl like being a pelvis, yeah.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that bowl can tilt forward or that bowl can tilt back. And we're talking about this anterior tilt. It's like the bowl has ended up tilting forward,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
that ends up leading to, the hip flexors, which are attached to the front of that bowl, ends up being, shortened and so tight. And then in the back of the bowl, you end up having the hamstrings that are end up connected, and those end up being elongated. And so you end up having issues in the front and in the back.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
then when that happens, I end up getting, they say my hamstring's tight, and then they'll go and they'll run, and then they pull a hamstring because it's already elongated,
Yeah.
and then, they just overextend it even more. So it ends up causing problems on both sides.